Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to give people about 2 minutes to get signed on. Hello, good morning. Welcome to today's web seminar. We're going to give people just 1 more minute to get signed on and then we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning again, and thanks for joining us. This is Simone Turek from John Burton Advocates for Youth. I'm here with Cecilia Lee from Persistence Plus and our director, Amy Lemley. And we want to welcome all of you in the first cohort of Beyond the Safety Net and just thank you for being with us today, but also thank you for kind of being with us, being along for the ride with us for the past couple of years, really, in this work. It's been really amazing, an amazing experience working with all of you. So thanks for being there and sticking with us and continuing to commit to improving the post-secondary education outcomes of all the young people that you work with, which we know is not easy. So we know that your college students in your programs have been receiving nudges from Persistence Plus since January. We've now closed out, spring semester, and we're all very curious, obviously, to hear what Persistence Plus has been learning from the student responses. So the students are receiving those nudges via text, and then they are sometimes responding back to those nudges. So what are they saying, and what can we draw from that information? I also know a couple of you are listening in from the second cohort and Beyond the Safety Net to kind of see what's to come when your students begin receiving nudges in August. We welcome you as well, and thank you so much for joining us. I am now, or actually before I turn it over to Cecilia, we have a very small group today, obviously, because this is just a webinar for cohort participants. So instead of kind of doing our traditional just submit questions throughout and we'll read them at the end, we want to give you a second option of, during the Q&A, of using the function, the hand raising function, and we'll unmute you, and essentially you'll be able to just talk into your phone or your computer speakers, whichever you're using, and ask your question live. So either or, feel free to still, if you want to just submit your question in the questions box, that's fine. We'll get to it during Q&A, or wait and then raise your hand and we'll unmute you, so it's more like a conference call. And just so to be clear, that questions box, and let me actually move forward so you can see this on the screen. You can see there on the right-hand side of the screen, there's that control panel. It's probably covered by your actual control panel. And on there, there's a questions box. That's where you would submit your typed questions. But if you want to raise your hand, if you see under next to your name, there's like a number of columns. One of those columns is a little hand. If you click that, it'll raise your hand. So that's how you do it. As we always do, we record our webinars. This will actually be posted on that Persistence Plus webpage. That's part of our cohort webpage. You can see the direct link there. And if you have any issues with audio throughout the presentation and you're using your computer speakers, try calling in, and you can use the information there on the screen, and it's also always available. If you uncollapse the audio section of your control panel, you'll find it there. Now I am going to turn it over to Cecilia to share all of this great information with us.
Thank you, Simone, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm Cecilia Lee. I'm the Managing Director at Persistence Plus, and it's been such a privilege to be able to work with John Burton Advocates for Youth and with each of your organizations in order to support your youth. And we got started late last year. You did the work of recruiting your youth, encouraging them to take advantage of this support that is going to be with them and motivate them in their post-secondary studies. So I want to thank you for that and share with you a little bit about how youth are responding. I think that I'm hoping this conversation can be twofold, both giving you some insights into the nudging strategies and behavioral strategies that we've been using to support youth, and then also looking at some of the takeaways from how youth have been responding and what we might learn from that. I think that we're really excited about the response that we're seeing. It is early, given that we've had one semester so far of supporting your students. And, as we go on, I think we'll have more insights to share. We're really excited to be looking at outcome data in the next term. But for now, I think that this is a great opportunity to share back some initial findings and also get some feedback from you about how you have been experiencing the program. So first, I just want to quickly review our approach to behavioral nudging. And, the Persistence Plus nudging model is really designed to meet students where they are and acknowledge that students need support not only with academic challenges and financial challenges, but also what we call psychosocial challenge. So knowing that so many students come to college feeling like they don't belong in college and that other students, aren't like them, or that they feel overwhelmed with managing school alongside their family responsibilities, work responsibilities, feeling like no one ever gave them the roadmap to college, and they don't know where to turn to for help. And so the Persistence Plus nudging model is designed to really incorporate strategies from behavioral science that we know, where we know a small nudge can make a big difference in people's mindsets and behaviors. Nudges have helped people get to the polls on election day. They have helped people remember to get a flu shot, or to conserve energy, or to save more for retirement. And so what Persistence Plus does is brings those strategies from behavioral science to the college completion setting, and help students navigate not only through procedural issues like taking advantage of priority registration and renewing their financial aid, but also some of these psychological issues like developing a growth mindset, productively reframing challenges, developing a sense of social belonging in college and knowing that others are struggling too. And, if they experience a setback, that doesn't mean that they're not college material. Knowing it's okay to reach out and seek help when they need it. So we combine all of that with our intelligent software system that is really designed to send the right nudge to the right student at the right time. And so nudges are personalized based on who the student is. So some of the data that you gathered helps us create a student profile and know how to intelligently nudge students. Again, the nudges are customized to the college that the student is at and that context. So it'll send students specific information on resources that are available on that campus. And then finally, the nudges respond to what students are saying in real time. And so they're conversational. They might respond to students differently depending on what challenges or experiences or goals students articulate that they have, what they're reporting is their current motivation level or stress level. All of those inputs determine what types of nudges students get, and so every student is getting somewhat of a different experience. And then finally, want to look at some of the goals and output of our model. So again, increased retention. I think that we've been seeing some really exciting work with foster youth over the years with our work with the Guardian Scholars Program, and have also been able to participate in randomized studies that show that these nudges are having an impact on retention and completion. I think that one of the aspects we really value is being able to increase student engagement and leverage student voice. And so hearing what they are saying through, the sort of two-way communication channel that can both engage them with the college experience, make them feel like, that someone has their back and that they have sort of a place where they can get their questions answered, or a guide that is helping them along the way to know sort of what are the ways to succeed in college, and then to be able to distill what they're saying and aggregate some insights that are going to not only feed back into our system to continuously improve and better target the nudges that we're sending to students, but also share out with you so that we can surface some trends about what your students are experiencing in college. So just want to talk about some of the engagement that we've seen so far. I think that with this first cohort, we're really excited to be, we're serving 162 students across 15 organizations, going to 48 different colleges. And students in this first cohort have received over 6,500 personalized nudges. What we're seeing is that 3 in 5 students are responding to the nudges, which we think is a great level of engagement. I think that we always want to see students responding. We know that students can also benefit when they don't respond. We've often talked to students who say that then they found the nudges so helpful, and they went to advising because of a nudge, but then we look back at the system and they've never once responded. So we know that students can engage with the platform in different ways. And then I think that one thing I want to share and that we're going to dig into a little bit more is that what we're seeing is that is that a majority of students, over 2/3, are committing to college success behaviors. And I'll show you some of what that looks like. So, we have various strategies on Persistence Plus in order to help students commit to goals and behaviors that we know lead to college success. And so many of the nudges pose questions to encourage help-seeking behaviors, encourage goal commitment, really normalize help-seeking and help students know that, like, if they need to, if they take advantage of tutoring, that doesn't mean that anything's wrong with them or that, they're going to unmask themselves as not belonging or needing help. It's just a normal and expected part of the college experience. And so, and I think that through some of our data analyses across our whole system, what we actually see is that students who commit on the platform to these positive academic behaviors are more likely to persist in college, and they have a significantly higher rate of still being enrolled the next semester. So here's one example of, a nudge that students get. And most successful students use whatever resources are offered at the college, like TRIO, EOPS, and again, this came from some of my initial conversations with you and your program that talked about the importance of taking part in these supportive services and how students can sometimes feel reluctant to do so. And so again, normalizing it for them, knowing that this is just what, most students do seek out help on their campus. And then what we saw was that 3/4 of students said that yes, they do take part in these programs. Some students, said sometimes or no. And what they actually get in response is additional information about the resources on their own campus. That this is what's available. Here's a number that you can call. And again, reinforcing and encouraging them to take part in this because, it's just a great part of the college experience. It doesn't mean that, anything is lacking in you. Here's another example of a nudge that encourages students to take advantage of tutoring. So again, we know that most students who visit tutoring earn ACBs, so it's not like you're failing and that's why you need tutoring. Will you commit to visiting next week? And this comes from, some multiple studies on behavioral science that show that when people make a public commitment to something and articulate, when and where they plan to do it, they're much more likely to follow through on their intentions. And so here we saw, I think that we actually saw 60% of students said maybe. That's a large number of maybes. They're open to it, but they're not quite sure if they're going to go. And so, again, students get follow-up telling them exactly where. It may be called the Learning Center at Citrus, or it may be called Academic Success Center at some other college. So they get the specific information. They get, the hours, the phone number, to make it easy for them. And so it gives them that information right there, but also, encourages them, maybe it would help to think of a time that you might like to visit, it walks them through goal setting. Will you visit? A student might say that they're going to visit on Wednesday, after biology class, and the system would actually follow up with them to ask them if they were able to do that and troubleshoot any challenges or concerns they might have about doing so. So then, I want to share a few examples of other nudges that students have received and some ways in which they are responding. So here, nudges do often prompt students to make plans for success, whether that is asking them to set an academic goal for that week, for the entire term, prior to finals, identifying their study plans. And this was actually a nudge that students, got, asking them to think ahead for the summer and think about their summer plans, such as, are they going to work? Are they going to take classes? Are they going for an internship? So here are just some examples of what your students said that they were planning to do over the summer. If they didn't have plans, if they said they didn't have plans, then they might get additional suggestions. It would be great to visit the internship office in your college and see what they have to offer. Depending on what students said, if they said that they're they would like to work, they might get a different message. One thing that we often, one nudge that we send is this motivational message. We often ask students at the beginning of the term to send themselves a motivational message, and that it will be sent back to them, during a time before finals or later in the semester when we know that students often are feeling like they're struggling, feeling a lot of stress, and we often hear from students that, like, if they remember one thing about the nudges they received, it's this motivational message, and they're often quite thankful or surprised when they receive it again later. And so here are just some examples of motivational messages that your students sent themselves and that they received back later in the term during before finals or during a time when they indicated they were feeling a lot of stress. They do get back their message, and we often hear from them how much they appreciate it. And then finally, want to share some advice that a student said that they would give to another student. And this is actually, a strategy from research called being the benefactor. And oftentimes, you can students who are, if you can get them to feel like they're not just receiving an intervention, but that they can draw on their own wisdom in order to benefit their peers, in order to be the ones who are offering the support to others. Oftentimes that can be very empowering and has been linked to positive outcomes in education. And so here we ask what, like, this, they actually got this at the end of the school year. What's some advice you give to another student starting next semester? And so students get a chance to reflect, not only on like what they've learned through the year, but to articulate that. And we actually will take these student messages and we do send them as advice to students. So, a student might get like, here's some advice from another Palomar student. And we find that they can be quite powerful in terms of framing things not just as like a message that's coming from the system, but here's a message from your peers who have been through it before. So I'm really excited to get to some discussion and hear about any questions or ideas that you might have. But I wanted to talk briefly about next steps. And so the youth who are currently on the platform are going to continue to get nudges this summer, aimed toward, getting them excited about going back to school, increasing re-enrollment, again, reinforcing that sense of social belonging prior to them starting the next term. And then they will continue to get nudges throughout the 2018-19 academic year, and different material than they saw this year, sort of building on that. And so you at your program, those students, well, you can recruit and add new students to begin in fall 2018. And so what we would ask you to do is to, just as you did the first time, to submit the data template to Carolyn with the student's information who would like to sign up by July 11th. So I think that Carolyn, will be following up with an email, but you can, we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about that process. I think that if you're able to speak to your students between now and then, and it looks like Simone wants to say something.
Sorry, we're making sure that the correct phone is muted, so there's not an echo. So yes, you actually already received an email from Carolyn much earlier this month with this. Nope, I'm sorry, you didn't. You received it from me. I'm confusing you with the second cohort. You received an email from me recently, I think possibly last week, with this information. And in that email was the consent form, the flyer, the Excel spreadsheet, and the instructions. And all of this stuff, along with all of the instructions for what you need to be doing, is also on that Persistence Plus page of our Cohort's webpage. So you can also get it there, but it's all attached to the email. And just to review, the flyer is intended to just be supplemental information so that you can, if you want to print it out, give it to your students, your youth, to help kind of explain what Persistence Plus is to them. That's what that's for. The consent form is simply, you don't want to give out someone's phone number and any information of theirs without getting their consent first. They're adults, they can consent to that, but you want them to know that you're giving out their phone number, essentially. So the consent forms are for that, and we don't need those. Those are for you, so that you have record of them giving you permission to share their information. So we do not need you to send us any of those consent forms. They're for your files. What we need is just that Excel spreadsheet with their information, with any youth that were not submitted in the last spreadsheet that you sent me, basically, or any youth that there's been changes to their phone number or their college. If you're unsure and you think, wow, I think I included Johnny on the last spreadsheet, but I can't recall and I can't find it, just add him, because what Cecilia's explained to me is that they receive Johnny's same information. When he's uploaded to the database, it'll know that, and it won't be like double texting him or anything like that. So, err on the side of caution, or inclusiveness of including students on the spreadsheet. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or Cecilia. And we're having you this time send it to Carolyn. She's the project associate for our organization now, and is kind of assisting us with a lot of this work. And so she'll be compiling that information and uploading it to the database.
Thank you, Simone. So, I think that now I'm really excited to move to some discussion and hear what questions you have. So I would love to hear what questions you have about behavioral nudging support, either about the nudges that are going out to students and, what strategies we're using there, or, questions that may have come up about how students are responding. If you want to, I would love to hear if you have heard from your youth about the nudges, any feedback that you have heard from them, whether, whether it's good, whether it's bad. I really want to hear what they're thinking and how they're experiencing it. And then if you have ideas for how we're improving the service, or how we can work together better, or information that you're hoping to learn through this partnership that we could share in a future call, that is something we would love to hear as well. So please feel free to either type your questions into the box, or I think if you use the hand raising function, Simone can sort of moderate us through any questions that you may have.
Hi, this is Amy. I'm manning the screen. And so one question is just, how do we delete youth who are no longer part of the program or have moved out of state?
Yeah, so you can just let us know that your youth have left the program, and if you would like to remove them from the nudges, we can do so easily. I think that as we set up this partnership, one thing that I discussed with Amy and Simone was that oftentimes we know that youth are in and out of college. They may need to take a semester off. They may be taking some time off with an intention to go back. And we have often heard from our partners in Guardian Scholars, we've heard from students in those programs that they felt supported even while they weren't enrolled, receiving the nudges. They had a plan to eventually go back, and sending the nudges, even though they weren't in college, was motivating and helpful to them. And so, I think that was something that we at Persistence Plus didn't expect, because the nudges are designed for enrolled students. But, we had that experience that some Guardian Scholar students were taking a term off and still appreciated getting the nudges. And so the way we designed the partnership was to be able to continue that nudging support to students, regardless of whether they're not enrolled. So like if they're not enrolled and the default is that they're going to continue getting nudges. But if you want to tell us that they have left and no longer wish to receive nudges, you're welcome to do so, and you can actually just indicate that when you submit your next data template. And then the youth, of course, can reply stop at any time.
Okay, next question is, if a student is not engaging with nudges, is there behavioral nudging that adapts to this, such as gentle confrontations or anything that asks why they might not be engaging?
That's a great question. So we actually do have a nudge that, we noticed that you haven't been responding. Are you more of a reader or a texter? So, it's gentle. It doesn't, it doesn't say that they have to respond or anything like that. But, students, we do always get some more students beginning to respond after they get that nudge. So, we love to see a high level of engagement. We, as students respond more, the nudges actually get a little more personal for them. But, it's still gonna work if they don't respond. Like, they're still gonna get college success nudges. And as I mentioned before, we often do hear from students that they benefited from them, even if they haven't responded.
Another question is, you mentioned that 2/3 of students respond to the nudges. Do you have any information about the average rate, or could it be possible that there are some students who are very high users and heavy responders? Like, what do you know about the average experience of the 2/3 of the participants who are responding?
That's a great question. I think in general, and I wish I had the data in front of me, but I know so it's exactly as you said. There are some students who are very heavy users, and they respond to every single nudge. And I think that we saw that the most frequent responder had responded 30 times. I think that the typical experience is that students sort of respond to a few nudges throughout the term. So they some students might respond once or twice. Some students might respond 10 times. So I think that we see sort of that most students who are responding don't respond to every question. They just kind of respond probably when they have time or when a certain thing seems relevant to them. But then there are some students who are just responding to everything.
So I see Tiana, you've raised your hand, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, and then you can ask your question. You should be unmuted now.
Hi, can you hear me? Not sure.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. I was just wondering, since my students aren't talking to me about these nudges, how do we verify if they're receiving them?
How do we verify that students are actually receiving nudges?
Tiana, thank you. That's a really great question. And I know that, I've spoken with some other participants before about this issue of students often, changing their phone numbers. So the short answer is that if students aren't responding, we don't necessarily have a way to verify that they're receiving them. And I know that this is sort of a challenge with this population, oftentimes changing phones that we want to be able to work through with you. And so there are a few, if students change their phone number, if you are able to send me an email and let me know, that's something that we can get switched over immediately. Students can also, if they know that their phone is gonna, be cut off or ending at a certain time or something, they can respond to the nudge with a new phone number, and we have had sometimes students do that. So neither of that is a perfect solution. I recently talked with one person from your programs who recommended that we send a automated monthly email to students asking if their number has changed, and I thought that was a great idea. So that's something that we can start to implement. But if you have other ideas for strategies, that you've found successful in dealing with students constantly changing phone numbers in your own communication with them, we're really open to hearing that and to modifying our practice.
Okay. I think what I'll do is just probably update the data template and resubmit it to Carol before the 11th of July, just to make sure that the numbers are correct and updated. and any new
Yeah,
youth that I am
absolutely.
working with there on the data sheet.
So the next question is, are there any nudges that deal with helping students navigate difficult stages of academic probation and or dismissal?
Yeah, great question. So that is not, so we have done that at Persistence Plus. That's not built into this engagement, and we don't necessarily know whether students are on probation. But, you know, I think that like looking forward at the next year, if that is an issue that you find that your students commonly deal with, we can think about ways to be able to integrate that. You know, I think we would need to think carefully about how that would be rolled out. And but no, currently, you know, we don't have the information about whether they're on probation, and you know, they're not getting anything like that.
All right, the next question is, when students commit to something such as attending tutoring, does Persistence Plus follow up to see if they followed through? If so, what is the subsequent response to students who did or didn't follow through?
I love these questions. Okay, so yes, we do follow up with students. You know, if they committed to going to tutoring, we often ask, you know, hey, were you able to go? How did it go? Super non-judgmental. Sometimes students say, no, I didn't go, and then the nudges would walk them through an activity called mental contrasting. It helps them to ask them like, well, what was standing? You know, you had this goal to go, so what stood in your way? And so asking them to identify the specific barrier, and then ask them to say like, well, what's one thing that you could do differently next week in order to meet your goal? And then it might remind them of that if they've answered. And then, you know, if students say yes, you know, we affirm that, that's great, and then sort of help them to make this sort of a regular part of their academic routine.
Okay, here's a question. Could a program staff get a dummy account to better understand the student experience with Persistence Plus so that they understand and have a sense of what these nudges are? They're not a student, but yet to get a sense of what these students are experiencing?
Yeah, we can do that. We have done it before in the past. So if you would like to, you know, someone on your staff would like to be receiving nudges, I would just ask that you indicate that on the template, like who you are. But yeah, that would be fine.
Did anyone in the disenroll from Persistence Plus?
Yes. So we did have students stop out, and I think it was about 10% or so who stopped out from receiving the nudges.
And I guess on a broader level, is there any information about who or who isn't responding or stopped out by like sex, age, race, college segment, and all that? Because that would be interesting to know, like who it's kind of working for and who it's not working for.
Yeah. So that is not something that I have at the ready, but I think that is a great question and something that we can cover at our next call together. And I also think that as the numbers grow, like as you enroll more students and as we get the second cohort on, there will be more useful data insights from that. I think like looking across our platform broadly, where we're serving tens of thousands of students, some of the trends that we see is that students of so the great news is that we see that the nudges are disproportionately benefiting students of color, adults over 25, and first generation students. You know, one interesting thing is that adults over 25, which I know that, you know, you're not serving, but one thing that we found is that those students respond at a much higher rate than younger students. And it's just funny because like oftentimes people sort of have the assumption that the kids who are texting, but actually we find that the older adults like respond to the nudges so much more. And then we find that students of color, and especially Hispanic students, tend to respond at a slightly greater rate.
And this is kind of related, maybe this is down the road, but do you or can the programs find out student, like, do you ask them if they successfully finished the semester? Do we know of the students who started the semester and got nudges, how many made it through to across the finish line? Do we know that now, and or will we know it in the future?
Well, we do ask students to reflect on their semester and like rate it from like 1 to 5. And then that actually determines like when they start next semester, you know, they might get some messaging like, if they said their last semester was great, they would get a message saying like, reflect on successful strategies from last semester, like what did you do to succeed, and like, you know, how can you do it again? Or if they said the semester wasn't so great, you know, walk them through like, well, what was challenging and who can you turn to for help? Like maybe, you know, there's a professor you can make a connection with, or someone trusted on campus who's going to help you navigate through these challenges. So that's an example of some of the messaging. It doesn't explicitly say like, you know, did you finish in academic good standing and are you coming back next term? And that's usually, you know, I think that like we'll be looking at the data of who return next term, but that's sort of the end of semester messaging that students get.
Will you be looking at it through the data that's provided through Beyond the Safety Net, or how will we know, how will that data be collected and analyzed?
Yeah, so we've discussed different ways, you know, working with you, the providers, to verify who's returned. We're also hoping that we can look at Top Hat Plus for the students who are attending community college and have a sort of a more systemic way of looking at it from that regard.
So I think we've come to the end of our questions box submissions. So just kind of last call here Amy has a question. So I'm going to pass the phone to her.
We're having kind of a virtual conversation question session. Could providers find out how students rated their semester? I mean, can providers get information so they can say, of the 23 young people enrolled in Persistence Plus in my program, you know, that information, how that semester went, what programs they utilized, you know, what was the kind of, where were the students who utilized it more or less, and can we disaggregate it to the provider level?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and something that we've like sort of been continuing to work through, because I see how this information would be very useful to you, but at the same time, we're not really set up to provide individualized responses and like everything that, you know, that students are saying on certain aspects. So you know, I think that that if there are certain things that you think would be really like crucial to know about how your students are responding, and then also keeping in mind that, like, you know, not every student responds to every question, so it may be a little bit, but I would love to be able to, like, you know, come out with like a report, here's a student, like a profile on each of your students depending on what they've said to nudges, but that's not really sort of the way our system is designed and the primary goal of it. And so again, I would just, you know, if there's certain things that I spoke about that, you know, you think would be really like, well, it would really help to know this in accordance with what our program is doing, you know, please, open to hearing it, and we can talk about how we might be able to share information on certain data points.
Great. So last call, we're doing last call. So submit your question or raise your hand and we can unmute you. Amy, are any more questions coming into that box? All right. So I think we are going to wrap up then. And of course, this is not, you know, truly last call in the sense that you can always email us and ask questions at a later date. But I think we've concluded. Cecilia's information is on here. You all have my information, and here's Cecilia's, and she welcomes you to contact her directly if you'd like, or myself. So thanks so much for joining us, and we're really looking forward to kind of continuing on with this. And as Cecilia mentioned, you know, fall semester, by the end of that semester, we'll have at least double the number of students. And so we'll have kind of a larger group of number of students to draw data from. And so the next webinar should be also very interesting, and that'll be at the very end of fall semester. So thanks everybody for attending, and have a fantastic rest of the week. Bye-bye.